Porsche Panamera of the first generation, 2009-2016 years of production. Good day, if you're wondering is it worth buying a first generation Porsche Panamera and what problems you may encounter during operation, then you're at the right place. So the quality of the body painting of any Porsche model raises no objections, as well as the build quality. In addition, many Panamera owners who were not at all financially constrained immediately covered their cars with a protective film with the cavity or partially. The first Panamera owners also did not save money on washing their cars. So you won't be able to find a Panamera with uneven body gaps or corroded seals, fenders or under the moldings. Of course, this doesn't apply to those cars that managed to get into an accident and were restored in artisanal conditions. By the way, it's important to understand that buying a cheap emergency Panamera only at first glance seems to be a very successful decision from a financial point of view. It's not possible to quickly and inexpensively restore a Panamera after an accident. The fact is that for the manufacture of the Panamera body, Porsche has used several types of materials: aluminum and cold-drawn steel and high-strength steel and a magnesium alloy. For example, aluminum has been used for the bonnet and boot lid, while the door window frames in the Panamera are made of magnesium. When buying a Porsche Panamera, you should carefully inspect the underside of the car. Of course, unlike the owners of the Cayenne, Panamera owners do not go to rough terrain, but the ground clearance of the German sedan is still too small for our conditions. As a result, damage to the bottom of used vehicles is common, and the older the cars on the secondary market, the more often they have traces of self-repair in the form of non-original plugs, clamps and fasteners. Signs of such savings clearly indicate that the expensive Panamera was too tough for some of the previous owners. At the same time, when viewed from below, it will not hurt to make sure that the hidden cavities are not clogged with dirt. Its presence clearly indicates that the car was not properly cared for. In addition, dirt clogged in the cavity in the future can become a catalyst for the formation of corrosion. The problem with the front optics, known to all owners of the Cayenne crossover, has not spared the Porsche Panamera. The German sedan has similar headlight mountings, thanks to which, with a simple tool and proper skill, they can be removed from their seats in just a couple of minutes. Fortunately, one-eyed Panamera are not so common, but when leaving for a few days, it's better to leave the car in a guarded parking lot. In any case, it will be cheaper since the original headlamp on the Panamera costs about 150-170,000 rubles. The analog from the Hella company cannot be called cheap either, from 60 to 70,000 rubles. Interestingly, many Porsche owners do not support thieves in principle and do not buy used optics, but since now used Panamera of the first generation have become almost an order of magnitude cheaper than new ones, the demand for affordable optics with a dark past will definitely not decrease. The Panamera Interior is aging slowly, even with a range of 100,000 kilometers. The leather on the seats and dashboard looks pretty decent. Rather, the true age and mileage of the car will be given away by scuffs on the steering wheel and leather door handles. But they appear much later than in more affordable cars. The oldest Panameras with very high mileage can be found with loose switches and scratched aluminum trims in the cabin, but there are still few such cars. However, in 5-6 years, when the used Panamera will change a few more owners, it will be impossible to ignore this problem. The electrics of the Porsche Panamera are very high quality, thanks to which the first owners during the first 3-4 years of car operation practically didn't know any problems with it. It's a different matter when it comes to the Panamera 9-10 years old. Whatever one may say, but age takes its toll, so it's necessary to check the performance of the air conditioner, various sensors and other electronic systems with passion. Particular attention to instances equipped with an electric sunroof. Over the years, their drainage is gradually clogged, which leads to moisture ingress into the interior. Cooling fans are considered to be relatively weak on the Panamera. In urban conditions, they have to work almost constantly, which is why they rarely serve more than 5-6 years. Parktronics can fail even earlier. The generator and numerous sensors can withstand about 100,000 kilometers. It's important to understand that in order to solve a seemingly trifling problem that any garage electrician can cope with on budget cars, Panamera owners will have to contact a branded service with the appropriate remuneration of specialists. And the electronic components and wiring themselves are very expensive, so even small repairs by the standards of premium cars can be ruinous. The basic version of the Porsche Panamera relied on 3.6-liter 6-cylinder unit. If you are not embarrassed by the modest power of 300 horsepower for Porsche cars, which provides the Panamera with acceleration to 100 in about 8 seconds, this option is quite worth looking at. The gasoline 6 is a priori cheaper to maintain and repair than older 8-cylinder engines, although spending in any case will be very decent, if only because the unit with 6 cylinders is technically a stripped-down version of the 8. The main advantage of the modest 6-cylinder engine is that it's slightly less prone to scoring on the cylinder walls, but only under the condition of regular oil changes, the use of exclusively high-quality fuels and lubricants, and the implementation of a number of simple recommendations. However, practice shows that not all Porsche Panamera owners are ready to at least not light on their cars until the power unit warms up to operating temperature. As a result, there are enough cases when even the 6-cylinder Panamera engine needed serious repairs even with a mileage of 50-60,000 kilometers. The pleasure is not cheap, depending on the complexity of the work, from 200 to 300,000 rubles. Many are sure that 8-cylinder engines of the Porsche M48 series lift less often, but in reality this is not at all the case. The mileage at which scuffs are formed in the 8, depending on the series of the power unit, may differ slightly, but it will definitely not work to avoid the complete appearance of defects on the cylinder walls. Often the owners themselves contribute to the early formation of seizures. If even owners of used Panamera do not usually save on engine oil, then practically no one is involved in the prevention of the cooling system after the end of the warranty period. As a result, after several years of operation, the radiators of the cooling system are completely clogged, after which the G8, which even in ideal conditions operates in a very severe temperature regime, starts to overheat every now and then. As a result, the thermal gaps go almost to zero, which leads to the formation of numerous seizures. In no case should you be allowed to save on fuel. Moreover, the use of low-quality 95 and even more 92nd gasoline not only leads to the formation of scoring, but also seriously reduces the resource of the direct injection system, the fuel pump, and also leads to accelerated stretching of the gas distribution chain. It's believed that bullies can be identified by ears. In theory, yes, but for this you need to understand this issue well, and the seizures themselves must be very deep and form in several cylinders at once. If we are talking about an early stage, then without special equipment it will not be possible to determine the presence of seizures. In principle, you cannot buy a Porsche Panamera without a thorough diagnosis. An endoscopy of the engine cylinders should be performed in any case. Moreover, the first masters who come across using cheap endoscopes in their work cannot be trusted with this procedure. An endoscope, first of all, must have a very high quality camera, and secondly a special swivel joint. In other words, the cylinder should be inspected 360 degrees and the piston should be pushed as far as possible. Unfortunately, not all pickups involved in diagnostics of premium cars comply with these recommendations. Interestingly, the owners of Porsche cars themselves are sure that the problem of scuffing is greatly exaggerated. If you do not save on consumables and complete all service procedures on time, then you can forget about bully at least 100 to 150,000 kilometers. Moreover, there are cases when the 8s from Porsche withstood 250 to 300,000 kilometers before overhaul. Of course, such cases are rare, but they eloquently indicate that initially the power units turned out to be very successful. The owners are solely to blame for the fact that they threw up problems with very small runs. However, even without scoring, Panamera owners will have something to spend their money on. For example, to replace the supports of the power unit, which on average can withstand from 60 to 100,000 kilometers. Replacing the upper supports does not cause big problems. The same cannot be said about replacing the lower supports. To do this, it's necessary to hang out the power unit, which does not in the best way affect the cost of work. There is no need to rely on an inexpensive Panamera service. That is worth at least replacing the engine air filter, which is impossible to carry out without dismantling the front bumper. Owners of a Panamera with high mileage are likely to encounter leaking cooling pipes. It's good if the tubes don't burst at the most inopportune moment. Typical problems of aging Panamera with a mileage of under 200,000 kilometers are practically exhausted turbines and a strong oil burner. If the unit consumes about 1 2 liters of oil for every 10,000 kilometers, one can only rejoice. Such consumption for Porsche engines can be considered normal. Another thing is when it comes to adding about a liter of oil for every 500-1000 kilometers. In this case, there is no doubt that a serious repair of the power unit is not far off. By the way, at this very moment, not wanting to invest several 100,000 rubles in a car, many Panamera owners put their cars up for sale. Turbines are generally considered reliable. Another thing is that by the mark of 150 to 100,000 kilometers, they physically develop their resource. If the owner increases the boost pressure or does not bother with timely maintenance of the engine, the service life of the turbines will be much shorter, not without constructive miscalculations. On the 8s that were installed on the Panamera before restyling, defective phase shifters were used. Their aluminum bolts were often sheared off, which ended with the meeting of pistons and valves. The obvious problem was only resolved after Porsche engineers began using much stronger titanium alloy bolts. Interestingly, not all cars with defective phase shifters were invited to official Porsche dealerships as part of the recall campaign, so it's impossible to exclude the possibility that future owners will have to fix the problems at their own expense. By the time the first generation Panamera went on sale, diesel power units were also registered under the hood of Porsche. One of them, a 6-cylinder 6 with a volume of 3.0 liters, Panamera shared with the Cayenne crossover. Surprisingly, the diesel version of the Panamera can be considered the best option to buy. Firstly, even high-tech diesel units of the VAC company are distinguished by fuel equipment that is not the most demanding on the quality of diesel fuel. Of course, it is by no means worth pouring a surrogate into the tank on purpose. This will not only lead to accelerated wear of the fuel injectors, but will also increase fuel consumption. As for the problems with metal shavings which formed as the injection pump worn out, it's not relevant for the Panamera diesel unit, since Volkswagen engineers solved it by 2010. Diesel-powered turbines are considered to be very reliable. Their resource, if properly operated, is at least 200,000 kilometers. Another thing is that many owners also cheap diesel engines. As a rule, they also prefer a very active driving style, due to which the resource of the turbine is reduced several times. However, nothing prevents you from separately diagnosing the turbine before buying a car. But even in this case, it's worth contacting only professionals who can measure the maximum boost as well as estimate the time that the turbine spends on connecting, and then fully assess the condition of the turbine and its residual resource. You should not be afraid of slight fogging of the inlet pipe. Another thing is when it comes to strong leaks. They clearly indicate heavy wear of the turbine. Before selling a car, they naturally try to hide oil leaks, ideally cleaning the engine compartment from deposits. As a result, copies with a perfectly cleaned engine compartment are worth checking especially carefully. Typical problems with the 3-liter diesel engine are leaks in the timing cover and sump. Oftentimes, official Porsche workshops suggest replacing the cover seals. If the leaks are very insignificant, then there is no great need for this. In the overwhelming majority of cases, up to a mileage of 170 to 100,000 kilometers, the smudges are very insignificant. Strong leaks again occur on cheap motors, which often have to work to their limit. Often leaks are also found at the junction of the power unit and the gearbox. Replacing current oil seals requires dismantling the gearbox, which is very expensive. As a result, most pre-owned Panamera owners prefer to ignore the fogging and only change the oil seal when the leaks become very large. Fortunately, this happens very rarely. Our motorists are aware of robotic gearboxes. Many of them really didn't prove themselves in the best way, but this doesn't apply to the 7-speed PDK box. Even in not the most benign operating conditions, it behaves very dignified. But it's important to understand that in the case of possible problems, you cannot count on inexpensive repairs. This is fully true for the 8-speed automatic Tiptronic S, which is paired with a diesel engine. But it's also famous for its enviable reliability. There are many known cases when on other models of the concern, automatic without serious problems served for 250-300,000 kilometers. The Panamera air suspension, which allows ground clearance to be verified within a few centimeters, cannot be inexpensive to repair by definition. For example, an original rack, which may need to be replaced after a run of 80-100,000 kilometers, will cost 110-120,000 rubles. An unoriginal item costs much less, from 20,000 rubles. Another solution to the problem is to restore the rack. It will cost 10-15,000 rubles. The service life of ball joints and silent blocks rarely exceeds 80-100,000 kilometers. Some drivers even have to change them every 50,000 kilometers. Silent blocks are changed separately. Ball joints are paired with a lever. Considering that the lower arm costs about 50,000 rubles, it will be very serious to fork out for updating the keeled suspension. The optionally available carbon ceramic brakes are definitely not worth the hunt for pre-owned Panamera buyers. Of course, they provide more effective braking dynamics, but it's hardly possible to fully appreciate it in urban conditions. The price of PCCB discs and brake pads can be shocking at all. Official Porsche dealers will have to pay more than 1 million rubles for a complete set. Many buyers of a second-hand Panamera of the first generation simply do not have that kind of money for car maintenance. It's also not necessary to count on the fact that carbon ceramic brakes will not require replacement throughout the entire life of the car. Often they require replacement even before the vehicle's mileage reaches 100,000 kilometers. Conventional brake pads and discs with slightly worse efficiency will cost an order of magnitude less. The cost of a complete set ranges from 90 to 120,000 rubles. As for the replacement interval, it will entirely depend on how actively the Panamera owner drives. On average, brake pads can withstand 20 to 40,000 kilometers. Brake discs last longer, from 60 to 80,000 kilometers. If you're the owner, then be sure to leave a comment about this car. Your review will definitely help others with the choice of a car.